Welcome to the Veterans Who Build show. Today's guest, we have a West Point graduate combat engineer officer who today serves as an SVP at a major general contracting firm, the Walsh Group, where he is leading an amazing initiative called Veterans at Walsh. I'm really excited for y'all to hear about his military career, his professional career, and what he's doing with Veterans at Walsh. A big shout out and thank you to our subscribers, to our listeners. Thank you as well. A reminder to please subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. It really helps build our channel. A quick shout out to our sponsor, Jet.Build. And without further ado, please welcome Rob VanGorder. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Welcome to the Veterans Who Build show. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Thank you.
Where are you calling in from? Where are you based out of?
I'm based out of a lot of places, but today I'm sitting in my office in Seattle, Washington.
Awesome. Where are the other places that you're typically based out of as well?
I live in Texas, but I run the Western U.S. Well, I'm sure we'll get to talking about that for a construction company. And so I currently have offices here in Seattle, Northern California, which is in the Concord area. Southern California, our office is in Corona. We have a bunch of work over in Orange County as well. And then a smaller office in Phoenix. And then, like I said, based out of Texas. Lately I've been spending a lot of time in Seattle.
Awesome. I love all of those locations. So that sounds good to me.
I'll trade them. Where are you at?
Let's do it. All right. Awesome. Let's kick off with your formal introduction. Rob VanGorder is a West Point graduate, combat engineer officer, combat engineer and heavy equipment platoon leader, company executive officer, sapper school graduate, and part of the 4th Engineer Battalion, 4th Infantry Division from Fort Carson, Colorado. Rob deployed in Operation Restore Hope, Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993. Today, Rob is a senior vice president of the Walsh Group and a 30-year heavy civil construction industry veteran involved in, for example, highways, bridges, water, and mining. Rob is the executive sponsor of the new employee resource group, Veterans of Walsh. And last but definitely not least, a proud father of 4. Rob, there is so much to congratulate you on that, but I want to highlight being a father of 4. That's amazing.
I can talk about my kids for 3 hours, and I don't think that's what the program's about. But yeah, it's certainly, it's the greatest accomplishment of your life is to raise good people. And my kids are all they're all adults, but I would say they're all young adults. But they're good young people.
Amazing.
I'm an Army guy, but I've got a Naval Academy graduate in the middle. My daughter in the middle she's currently serving on a ship in the Pacific. And the oldest daughter becomes a doctor this coming Thursday or Friday morning.
Wow.
So some exciting stuff. And the other ones are doing great stuff too. But it's just exciting to watch them grow and turn into really cool people.
Amazing all around. Congratulations.
Well done. That's my favorite part of talking. I love talking about my kids.
Awesome. Love to hear it. All right. So as our audience knows, and as you know as well, we like to kick off with childhood. Tell us about where you grew up and what in childhood led you to your service.
Yeah. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm from the Midwest. I consider myself a Midwesterner. I was raised in the younger years in Cleveland, Ohio. My mother, basically raised by a single mother with a brother and a sister. And then when we got a little bit older, we moved up to the Marblehead Peninsula, which is a peninsula that sticks out into the southern coast of Lake Erie. It's kind of a rural area. So I went formative years. I was junior high and high school. I went there. Small school. Got to do all the things that you get to do from a small school. I got to play football, baseball, all sports, all the activities. So because I didn't realize it at the time, but it was an awesome place to grow up and being right there on the lake. And I don't know if I don't know when I had a epiphany about joining the military, but I got real interested. It was about 8th grade. I got interested in, well, what about going to West Point? West Point sounded really cool, and to an 8th grade kid. And I had a teacher that was talking about it, and then so probably the time about like freshman year in high school, one of my football coaches was also the high school guidance counselor. He's still with us, and we're still friends. And he would tell a story of this little 9th grade kid that walked in and say, "What do I got to do to go to West Point?" One of the things I knew back then, times were tough for a single mother raising 3 kids. My mom worked multiple jobs, and I didn't have the money to go to college, and I was good at football, but not great. I didn't have a pathway to that. And I mean, one of the things I knew about it was that it was free. And I certainly knew what I was getting into. So I worked very hard in high school, and was able to, my senior year in high school, get secure. I think I was we didn't have political poll. I was my congressman's 10th alternate nominee. Apparently the other 9 couldn't qualify for the academic standards or something. So I got lucky there. But yeah, and so off I went. I think what got me started was more of an interest in going there. That being said, my mother was not super positive about it. She kind of grew up in the late 60s, and her son going in the military wasn't her favorite thing. Her father, my grandfather, who was a huge influence in my life, was ecstatic. He was a World War II veteran. He was a tech sergeant in the Army Air Corps and fought in the South Pacific, the Battle of Midway, Guadalcanal, did the island hopping tours. And he's a big influence in my life. He never pushed me to go to West Point, but I knew that was a big proud thing for him. So yeah, my mom had to sign a note. I was only 17 years old. I wasn't even 18 years old when my class started. And so off I went to West Point, and I think it was there that I learned, about being in the military more so than going to a military academy. And boy, you learn it fast there. And so, but I loved every minute of it. I can, honestly say, it was brutally tough the first year, and then it got, progressively better. I am still, to this day, I'm 55 years old now. To this day, I'm still absolute best friends with the three or four guys that we were put in our rooms, on day one together back in 1986. So you go through that with people, you become lifelong friends, and so we still have that. And so yeah, I went through West Point for 4 years. You get lots of exposure to various different things in the military. There's a big portion of that I wanted to fly. I thought I wanted to be an Apache. Back then it was Apaches, and I wanted to be an Apache helicopter pilot. It was peacetime. There was nothing going on in the world from 1986 to 1990, to early 1990. So and that was kind of my passion. Then it was the summer between my junior and senior year. You do your academic year there, and you're under military regiment and environment. Then in the summer, you go train with the regular Army in some capacities. And so summer between my junior and senior year, I went to airborne school, Fort Benning, which is now Fort Moore, and then I went out to Fort Ord, California, which is no longer a base now, but it was near Monterey. It's where it was home of the 7th Infantry Division, 7th Light Infantry Division was back in those days. And I did a program called, I've been out of the military for 30 years, so if I screw the acronyms up, you're going to cut me a little slack, because I used to be really good at them. Like I know
you got the slack.
Yeah. But I did a program, I think it was called CTLT, Cadet Troop Leader Training. And it was basically, as a cadet, I was placed in a platoon leader position in a unit that maybe didn't have a second or first lieutenant running the platoon. And, they knew you were there for a training environment, but you got to function as the platoon leader. And I went that summer, and I did it for a platoon of light combat engineers, sappers, 13th Engineer Battalion of the 7th Infantry Division. And I just spent the summer at Fort Ord with those soldiers and doing training exercises. Somewhere in there, we ran a marathon with Brooks. It was just it's a high intensity summer. And so when I came back for my senior year, when you get to select your branch of service, and then you do that one night, and then you do it for your post, I decided I wanted to be a combat engineer. So I selected engineers as my branch. Then few months later, post-selection comes out once they figure out how many people they have in engineers. And I was, at that time, engaged to be married to my high school sweetheart, and we talked about where we wanted to go, and we picked Colorado Springs, which put me in the 4th Infantry Division, 4th Engineer Battalion is the combat engineer battalion back then. I'm sure some of that is, I'm sure a lot of that's changed now. But that was the engineers that supported it. And I didn't know a lot about the mechanized combat engineer business, or I didn't know as much, certainly as I did after I served there. But it was a unit of mechanized combat engineers. So,
well, Rob, before we continue into joining your battalion, quick question back to kind of childhood, and you end up going to West Point. Did your grandfather talk about World War II to you, or was that just something you knew that he served?
No, he talked about it some. I mean, I don't think it was. He was, I don't think it was 5 years of his life he enjoyed, for sure. My grandfather was born in 1920, so you can do the math, right? And so he joined the Army Air Corps on December 8th, 1941. He was born in England. So he was an immigrant, and with a twin brother, and his twin brother is off in the Lutheran seminary, my great uncle. And he was just working his way up, lived through the Depression and in the late 20s into 30s, and he joined right away and went off, and he would talk to me some about it. He probably talked to me more about it after I was a soldier for a while, and an older man. He would, just the old school way of someone that's now would be over 100 years old and certainly not alive anymore, but he used to just write me these really long letters, and when I was in Somalia, he like chronicled his whole life in letters, and so it was pretty cool. But he would talk about it. He was wounded. He started as a tail gunner in a B-24, and the plane got hit from the front, and so he got shrapnel in his butt. So he always joked his whole life about getting shot in the ass, and he was, and I think it was, flying the number of missions they flew, I think it was pretty traumatic for him. So, he wasn't, he had a few harrowing moments that he later speak about. And I found out when he passed away in 2000. And I was part of helping to clean up some stuff. And I found, quite a few letters and things like that. So it was really interesting to look back in his life.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. Yeah.
And he's part of the greatest generation, right? That's what we described that Europe in. So, it was certainly influential to me.
Yeah. Wow. And in high school, were, peers around you, kids around you, were they enlisting as well, or were you kind of one off in that scenario?
Not yes and no. So my best friend while we were in high school, also named Rob, I went to West Point. He enlisted in the Army. We were young guys, and that was probably the options available to him at the time. He's super smart guy, but I was better in school on the grades and could get into West Point, I think. But not as much. It's been interesting to watch. I raised the kids in a college preparatory type high school in Ohio. All my kids graduated from the same high school in Ohio, and my daughter that went to the Naval Academy was always very interested to be involved in the groups of her classmates that were going into the military. She jumped into that even though she was going to an academy. And the number there was it was low. Every now and then I'll realize that the number of veterans in the actual population is such a low percentage. You don't realize how low it is. And so then it starts to make sense. Okay, maybe only 8 kids out of 300 graduating join the military. I guess my mind's eye, I would have thought that was more back in my day. But
right.
Yeah, it wasn't, definitely was kind of going out on my own.
Right, yeah.
When I went off.
That's what I was asking. I was just, interested in if there was like influence from those around you, or if it really was kind of you going off on your own. It sounds like, the latter. So yeah, really interesting. So walk us through the kind of application and acceptance process of West Point.
Yeah, it's Well, having just seen a kid go through it too, this is all very fresh in my mind. To get into a service academy, you need two things, and the two things equal an offer of employment. You need to get, some form of a nomination from either your congressman, your senator, if you get the president, or there's some at-large type. If your father's ever won the Medal of Honor, automatic appointment, those types of things, or your father or mother. So you have to go through an application process with all of those people that represent you. So that's 4 or 5 different application processes. And then you have to apply to the academy. And, the academy just has some basic, obviously has some very high standards with regard to academics and activities and physical fitness. And you have to go take the DOD-MERB, and that's what it was called, the DOD medical examination, when you so you have to go prove you're medically fit to go. You have to go do a PT test, some running, some pull-ups, and those types of things. You have to prove that you're physically fit to do it, and then then you have the grades and ACTs. So, and then they want to see some patterns of leadership activities. Like I said, I went to a real small school, so I was captain of my football team when I was a senior in high school. That's something like that checks a leadership block for them. And so you apply to the academy. Academy can accept you, but if you don't get the nomination, you're not coming in. You can get the nomination, but if you don't get accepted by the academy, you're not getting in. But if you get the combination of the two, and there's some limitations to how many people a certain congressman can have at the academy at one time. I believe it's 5. They kind of have 1 per class and maybe 1 at large. So, but you might, potentially the year that I got in, my congressman might have had 2 or 3 slots open up. If somebody goes there and they quit, so he gets an open slot. And so they were able to put my acceptance to the academy together with a nomination. And then I got an offer of admission. And then, then I accepted it, right? I had a chance to go there and be challenged and get a great education. And so that was good. And I watched my daughter go through it, and my comment to her is, she just graduated this last year from the Naval Academy.
Amazing.
But I told her, so this is 5 or 6 years ago, watching her do it, it was a full-time job. Job. She applied to both West Point and the Naval Academy. Proud to say she got into both. Not so proud on Army-Navy football Saturday that she chose the Naval Academy, but it was her thing. It was a much better choice for her because it's just really her thing. But she was doing all that. It's like, God, this is a full-time job, to apply to get in and the stuff she's doing. So.
Yeah, congrats to her. That's amazing, and that's a very intensive process. Where did the physical exams take place?
You would go to. They would have a Saturday at a college or something where all the people that were applying, you'd have to show up, and they'd have some. I'm sure they were probably from the recruiting forces or something, some sort of local unit. They'd have some cadre that would set up, various stations in time. You count your push-ups and all that stuff. But you were doing all that in the civilian world before you went off there. So.
Right. Makes sense. That's what I was asking. So walk us through kind of like a typical, monthly schedule, more or less, of West Point. What's it like there?
Well, one of the things, it's a tremendously rigorous 4-year college education, right? So I don't know, I've got 4 kids that have gone through either completed college. I still have 2 finishing some college, and I've seen some of their credit hours vary. Like for example, I know that my daughter that's at Arizona, she's at the University of Arizona Tucson. She's taken like 21 hours, and that's a pretty big load. And I remember from my time at West Point that the load was always about that. It was, you were taking, there's lots of math and science. West Point is a Bachelor's of Science degree. You can get a BS in political science or a BS in language from an academy, but you have to take all the core courses. So there's always some baseline math and engineering. It's pretty rigorous. I'll speak to how it was 30 years ago. Place has changed quite a bit, I'm sure. There's a 3-star general in charge of it. He's the superintendent. His name's Steve Gill, and he's my classmate. That's how old I got. Now my classmate's running the place. But when I was there from August, we would go back from summer military training, and we would you were organized into cadet companies. So you get up in the morning, there was a breakfast formation. You would form up, march to breakfast, eat breakfast, class all morning, form up, march to lunch, eat lunch, class all afternoon. After class in the afternoon, there was mandatory physical fitness or basically mandatory sports or drill and ceremonies. West Point puts on a lot of parades, still does. It's part of the, part of the pomp and circumstance with regard to like a good football Saturday at Mikey Stadium to see the Corps cadets do a full dress parade in the morning, and then you go up. So in the afternoon before dinner, you were required to play sports. So you didn't play an NCAA sport. You were playing intramural sports, and then you would go to class, and then you would have dinner, and then there's certainly there's a fourth class system that's varied and changed throughout the years. There was the old school, from the old school hazing to now it's they just create new ways to make at least the first year more challenging, lots more duties, and so you would do dinner and you'd have some duties that by the class system, the lower class cadets would have to go around and deliver the laundry and do some things like that, but you function as a military unit,
Right.
And then in the academic year, from I don't remember what it was like 7 p.m. to like 11 p.m. they called it call to quarters, where it was quiet time, study time, and depending on your course load, you might have some time to socialize, but basically, you were studying every evening. We would go to class 5.5 days a week. We did have college classes on Saturday when I was there, and then we kind of get our Saturdays and Sundays off to, go to the gym and do things with our friends. And you do all that with very limited breaks. I think my first year there, we only got 2 free weekends, and but you grow out of that. My last year there, you're allowed to go. They take your independence away, and you get it back by the time you get out the back end. But
Right.
yeah, and then the summers are just the summers weren't off. The first summer you're there, you go through what's called Beast Barracks, which is essentially basic training, and then some. Second summer you're there, you go out to a place called Camp Buckner, and you learn about different military skills and do a lot more military training, Army training. And the third and fourth summers you're there, you have opportunities to train with the regular Army, different places. Like I said, I went to airborne school, I went to Fort Ord. I did a voluntary summer session at NASA. I was a mechanical engineer by degree, so I did like a research project at NASA as one of my little summer sessions. And then you also, in one of those 2 years, or sometimes both of them, you have to go back and be the cadre. You have to put the new cadets through base barracks, or put the third class cadets through some of the military training. So it was pretty rigorous and intense. I didn't get home a lot, and not a lot of people do. So it was
Right.
Like I said, as I look back on it, there were a lot of tough days, but the guys that went through it with me, and guys and girls that went through it with me, we're best friends forever. And that's one of the things that I always talk about the military, just in general, is that it certainly has its problems with regard to diversity and inclusion and equality and all that, but it's by far, I think, even though it has its problems, it's by far one of the best organizations in the world for that, because you get put on teams with people around you. You're not looking at that he's Hispanic or this person's black or she's female. You were just saying who's dependable to pull a task through. So you end up with a really just incredible, diverse friend group. It's phenomenal, and it's one of my great takeaways from that time.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it clearly sounds intense. At the same time, it sounds like a lot of incredibly valuable experiences and learning lessons and bonding to the point that you're making. So really interesting. So you said you were a engineer. I think you said mechanical, right? Yeah, mechanical. So are most people, based on kind of what you said in terms of heavy on like math and sciences, are most people graduating there as engineers?
I would say I don't know the numbers. I haven't looked at them in many years, but it's a very engineer-heavy school.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of offerings. I mean, I chose mechanical. We're going to talk about my. I've been in a civil engineering job for 30 years, so it's the mechanical background is fine also. then a lot of like systems engineering, and I think that there's management systems and stuff like that. But you can. Well, my daughter that graduated from the Naval Academy, she has an Arabic major, so she took all the math and STEM and core courses, but she chose as her electives to get her major in language, and she's an ensign in the Navy right now. She speaks 3 different languages, and so the mission the mission statement of all those places has changed over the years, and it has to. It needs to be able to grow and be alive. But back then it was about creating. The mission is to create leaders of character for the nation. And so having that kind of broad-based opportunities. Some people went into medicine, some people went into law. So it's there's unlimited choice. But I was an engineer, really good at math. It's my lucky thing.
That's great.
Kids hate math. I think math's fun, but and so engineering was always kind of a sweet spot for me. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. I've never done mechanical engineering, other than fixing things at home or whatever. But it's not for me in my business. It's a tremendous foundation to be in the construction industry and to have an engineering mind and to be able to, we're bidding projects all the time. We're looking at different things and nothing, it's you're able to understand the explanation, and our clients are typically engineers as well, so you have to be able to speak that language. And so it's for anybody going into construction, whether you're got an opportunity to get a college degree and get an engineering degree, or coming out of the military, just even if you're coming out enlisted, some of the schools and offerings that the military has with regard to what they're teaching people gives you that foundation to be successful, even though you might be doing a little bit, a slightly different type of construction or whatever it may be. I have a nephew that joined the Navy out of high school, and he was a tremendously smart kid. And they sent him to nuke school in Charleston, and he worked worked his way up as a junior enlisted. I think he made mid-range non-commissioned officer, and then he got out. But he joins the workforce with essentially that same skill, that's coming out with that engineering problem solving type background that I think a lot of people get, and they maybe sometimes don't realize how much they get out of it, especially some of the military schooling that's available to people.
Right. I like to say like a technical understanding of the trade, which, as you pointed out, is always going to be helpful for a variety of reasons. That's awesome. So walk us through what happens from kind of where I cut you off and rewound a little bit. Okay. Walk us through graduation and then arriving to your battalion.
Graduation and so I guess I'll just talk about that kind of next transition. Graduate, took some leave. I went to the Engineer Officer Basic Course, which was a 6-month course at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. It had previously been at Fort Belvoir. Someone else you had on this show, who I'll talk about in a little bit, Dave Richards, that was right when they switched, because when Dave told his story, he told you he went to that school at Fort Belvoir, and they just moved it to Fort Leonard Wood. So I was a couple of years behind him in the Army. So Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Lost in the Woods, I have fond memories of it. It was, we learned our engineer trade, and that school teaches you to be both combat engineer and a construction engineer, because in the Army and the Corps of Engineers, there's really battalions that do 2 different things. There's horizontal, vertical construction battalions, and there's guys that lay mines and blow things up, and I was on that side of it. But you learn a little bit of all of it. That was 6 months, and then I showed up. So what happened in the meantime? Graduated in May of '90, the peacetime world. Well, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in August of 1990, and I was at the Engineer Officer Basic Course, and all my friends and classmates were either those that were there with me and engineers. We were all at Fort Leonard Wood, but again, all the guys that went infantry at the time were at Benning. So we're all in our basic course schools, and the first Gulf War essentially kicks off, and so. While people were starting to graduate out of our basic courses, there were a lot of guys that were leaving the basic course and going to meet their unit in Saudi Arabia. That was during the real big buildup. In fact, I got married. I graduated from the basic course on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 1990. Or no, yeah, I graduated on Wednesday. I got married on that Saturday, and there was maybe 20 guys. We wore our dress blues, came out under sabers and all that stuff, and there was about 20 guys in uniform at my wedding. I think 10 or 15 of them were leaving for Saudi Arabia on Sunday or Monday, because that's where it was at. I fortunately or unfortunately, whatever, I was not. So I was heading for Colorado Springs in the 4th Infantry Division, which was not deploying at that time. And so I showed up, a brand new second lieutenant, at Fort Carson, Colorado in December of 1990, and joined my unit right away. And there was talk of that we were going to go, and the fourth. What I didn't. This is what you learn later in life, and you didn't realize is the 4th Infantry Division was one of the last back then. Was one of the last to get Bradleys and the M182s, I think it was, for heavy combat vehicles. So we were still in some of the tank battalions were still in M60s, and and our infantry guys were all in 113s versus the Bradleys, and so that's probably why it was like last in the chute. So yeah, showed up, trying to find my way around, the military. Probably my best story from that time was that there was an E6 named Staff Sergeant Philip Koppel. You're out there, Phil, and you ever listen to this? So he was the platoon sergeant of 1st Platoon, Alpha Company, 4th Engineers, whatever. And he had been, they didn't have a platoon leader, and he had been the platoon sergeant / platoon leader for quite a while. And so I walked into what was a really great situation for me, was the guy'd been in the Army probably 20 years, right? And I'm just this new guy walking in. And a great situation for me was when I walked in, he said, "I'm glad to see you." And I think he genuinely meant it because he was doing both jobs. So it was, but no, he was, as a young, in that situation, and you're young officer, you don't have the salt, the dirt in your boots that some of those guys do. So, I was extremely fortunate in my time as a lieutenant in the Army to have just phenomenal non-commissioned officers that I had great relationships with. I actually just went back to a reunion this last year. There was a 30-ish year reunion of some guys from the next company I went to, was Charlie Company, and a bunch of the non-commissioned officers retired from that and stayed in Colorado Springs area. And so my girlfriend and I we just went up there for a weekend and went to a barbecue, and it was just great to see these guys, and I just thanked them for all they taught me when I was a young officer, and for not throwing me under the bus. So it was great. But yeah, so that 1990 rolled in 1991. I mean, if you know the history books, right? So we got deployed out to a place called Pinyon Canyon. It was like 20 degrees below zero. It was freezing, and but we're out there practicing because we might have to go over to Saudi Arabia where everybody else is. And then if you're a student of that war was over in about 100 hours, and we kind of, instead of training to go there, I think we kind of packed up and went home, and got back into more of a peacetime mentality of preparing for that unit would do an annual rotation to the National Training Center, Fort Irwin, NTC, as a lot of guys in the Army know about. And so we just went into a rotational training for NTC and got ready for it. We did an NTC in July of 91, and that was kind of I guess the culmination of my line platoon leader time. At the end of 91, a group of us from the 4th Engineer Battalion trained up, and I don't know how it is today, but back then you went to sapper school as a unit, and it was certainly voluntary. It wasn't necessarily, so there was my company commander there was a captain, my company XO was a first lieutenant, and there was probably 2 or 3. I was a second lieutenant at the time, and then maybe 15 or so of our NCOs. Maybe SAP school is rigorous, so I would say maybe the more fit guys. I remember we made a couple guys that were E4s corporals, so they could go, because you had to be a non-commissioned officer or an officer to go, and we frocked some people to corporal, and we took the corporals through maybe E6, E7, and a group of 20 of us went off to Fort Leonard Wood that fall, and we did a lot of training up after NPC to get ready for it, and went through Sapper School. Sapper School is relatively new then. I think it's a little more popular, more well known now. I think it was, I don't know. I'm a sapper. I should know that what the origin of the school was, but this was back in 1991. So.
For those that don't know, explain what Sapper School is and what it was like going through it.
So what Sapper School is, it's a rigorous training school that focuses on patrolling techniques, and then combat engineer skills. So, for anybody that listens that knows anything about Ranger School, the joke would always be that Sapper School is Ranger School for engineers, because in both schools you go through kind of a 2-week called a garrison phase, which is really heavy in PT and pushing you there, but also studying various topics and studying patrol methodology. So the instructors that were at Sapper School, most of them were Rangers and Sappers as well. And so, but if there's anything, I don't know, I didn't go to Ranger School. I chose to go Sapper School instead. So it would be, I think a lot of the classroom instruction is a lot of calculating explosives, and different mines, things that are considered combat engineer skills. So you do a 2-week phase of that, and then you go out on a patrol for 2 weeks at Fort Leonard Wood, and and then you rotate, who's in charge and who gives the operations order, and you have to get 2 goes. And you either go no go on your assignment for that particular mission. You have to get 2 full goes in that patrolling phase to be able to graduate. And Sapper School is a month long. At the end of that month, you either graduate or you complete. And graduate is people that, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but maybe the 20 or so of us went. It was about 50-50. There's some guys that just struggle with some of the things, but they finished, and it's hard. It's very, very hard. It's very rigorous. You're awake for 48 hours. You're on your feet. They have a POW phase. They have all kinds of interesting, challenging exercises. So, and then kind of tying it back. And I have a lot of friends that are Rangers, and I have a lot of respect for that. At Ranger School, you do everything I just described, and then you do it for another month. They go on 3 different 2-week patrolling phases, and if they don't get their 2 goes, they recycle and they keep completing them. So it's not to compare it as far as the level of difficulty or the length of the suck, just to give it kind of contextually. So it was great. It was great, and then we came back, and we were more cohesive as a unit, and it was really, really cool experience for me.
And taking one step back now, we have like more context. Actually, I'm going to take a big step back because it's something that I just remembered and I wanted to ask. Going to airborne school while you're still in West Point, was that something that is typical for West Point, attendees, I'll call it, meaning not yet graduated, to be in airborne school, or were you like a one-off with active duty?
It's a pretty common summer training to get. Typically, and I don't know if that's true now or not.
Right.
Typically between your sophomore and junior year, or between your junior year and senior year, back then, most guys would either go to airborne school or air assault school. There'd be a handful of guys that would go to jungle school. There used to be a jungle school. I think there still is now. There were occasionally people that would go. There was always a few that would try to do complete Ranger school during summer training. In fact, my roommate, my senior year, tried to complete Ranger school in the summer. He's actually an exchange cadet from Senegal, West Africa, so he was using that opportunity. Wow. And because the academic year is this many weeks, and he was a beast of an athlete. He was just a beast, and he was so strong, such an incredible runner. He went to Ranger school all summer. He didn't get his tab because he got hurt and didn't finish one of the phases. And he was not like if you were out in the regular Army and you'd gone there, you would have a chance to recycle, heal up, and then go back and redo that 2-week phase or whatever. So he was pretty bummed. But so getting airborne wings was my only mistake at airborne school. Was that I showed up I thought we were supposed to travel in our uniforms, and I had a white over gray and a white shirt, like kind of in a semi-formal, not semi-formal, but a nice looking uniform. Showed up to showed up to airborne school, and they thought there was quite a few of us in those uniforms, and we were just a fresh target for push-ups.
Yeah, right.
My memory serves me. I got dropped for like 720 push-ups, 10 at a time. My first day at airborne school.
So that was where I was going. That
and I didn't serve in an airborne unit. There's
right.
I don't know if I know a little bit about what you did in the military, but I would classify. I think they call it 5 jumps, right? So you get airborne wings, and you jump the 5th time, and you never jump again. So I never had to do that again.
Right. So part of what I was going toward, out of curiosity, was how you were received in airborne school in general. So you kind of alluded to that.
Yeah, and there was, and it was in the heart of the summer. I mean, the airborne school is probably 300 or 400 people per rotation or whatever. And in my particular rotation, it was probably half cadets. So it wasn't like we were, there's just this strange guy out there. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So like moving forward a little bit, I know you mentioned you graduated, then you had your 6-month course specific to your engineering training, and then you got to your unit. Was there like an integration period that happened, or you kind of just went full steam ahead moving forward?
Full steam ahead. Oh,
Cool.
I had a tremendous company commander. We were, again, I needed to kind of give you the context of the state of the world at that time. We'd been at peace for a very, very long time. And all of a sudden, we got everybody heading for Saudi Arabia. I'll talk about another guy here because he comes back to the story. So when I showed up at that unit, my executive officer, the first lieutenant, who was my company executive officer, Dave Richard. He was on your podcast here a little while ago, and he's the one that shanghaied me for this one. But so Dave and I, Dave was MXO, and I was like a new line familiar, and then we quickly discerned that I was young, married, no kids, and my wife and I, now my ex-wife and I, we'd gotten a condominium, and we figured out that we lived across the street from Dave and his lovely wife Vicky, so we became very good friends with those guys, and served. We both were in the same unit and lived across the street from each other for a number of years. We both had a lot of the same hobbies. We liked to hunt. We did a lot of hunting together, so we got to be pretty good friends. Dave and I are still very, very good friends to this day. And when we talk about the construction part, we have a lot of similarities. My youngest daughter is living at Dave and Vicky's this summer. She's got an internship in Phoenix, and they live there now. So,
that's amazing.
Lifelong
that's
friends.
Cool.
You make those things. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's how it was back then, and maybe they've done better. One of the big things I think make you successful in construction is mentor protege relationships, whether those are formalized, which we've done in a number of businesses that I've run over the years, or if they're even informal mentor protege. I think it was all more informal back then, but Dave, as a friend, was also 2 or 3 years, probably more, maybe 3 or 4 years more time in the Army than I did, and so there's some. I had a great company commander, that really challenged us and was a good guy, and so that was. It's for me. That's some of this. I'm like remembering as I'm telling you because it's been so many years ago, but. But just to kind of progress through some of that. So in that unit, I completed my time as a line platoon leader. Kind of the culmination was finishing Sapper School with my guys, which was tremendous. And then I got moved into another company to be I'm going to say heavy equipment platoon leader. Back then we called it A and B, which was assault and bridge. Then later in the Army, it got changed to A and O, assault and obstacle, but it was the heavy equipment platoon. So it had all the dozers and backhoes for digging in particularly mechanized defensive positions, and then we also have the armor vehicle launch bridges. We have the CEV, the combat engineer vehicle that shoot the big 165 millimeter demolition cannons, and they have a blade on the front for knocking stuff down. And it was just so spent time in that unit. I don't have any deployments or anything exciting about that. That was probably that role for about a year. We did another NTC rotation. I got to be to do all the digging at NTC. On my first rotation was about practicing blowing up minefields, replacing minefields. The second one for me was some of this earth moving type stuff. Had a tremendous platoon sergeant there as well. He was actually the guy that invited me to come back to Colorado, and I couldn't wait to see him. I've seen him all those years. He retired as a sergeant major, but his name was E7, Andrew Hilson, and so recently saw him too. But that was kind of an uneventful from a world timeline perspective. Not a lot there. And then my next role was I stepped into the executive officer role of that company, of Charlie Company, that I'd just been the heavy equipment platoon leader in, and started working for, working as the second in command with the commander. I had a really good relationship with First Sergeant Montgomery, who's also long since retired. So the XO and First Sergeant, you kind of, the commander has to. He's with the colonels, and he's at the, getting the operations orders. Behind the scenes, it was a real cool opportunity as first lieutenant with a really good first sergeant to run I think we were like 108 man, with the heavy equipment platoon, 3 line platoons, and then the associated staff. It wasn't this massive company for that. But our company, we would go to NTC, and we went to NTC again as when I was an XO. But our company would be broken out of the engineer battalion. We would be assigned as one company. We would be assigned to either an armor battalion or an infantry battalion, mechanized infantry battalion. We would kind of go through the NTC rotation with they would call it task force, because they would also trade armor companies and infantry companies, right? So so we would go be assigned to a task force, and that's how we would go through. It was during my time as XO. It would have been about February of 1993 that I got a phone call from the colonel's office that said, "Hey, we just got a call that they need a senior first lieutenant with experience to go to Mogadishu, Somalia, to work for the Joint Task Force engineer. And I want you to go back in the back and ask Lieutenant XYZ, I'm not going to say his name, if he'll go." Because I had a first lieutenant running my heavy equipment with him. And I said to the colonel, "Well, how come you're not calling me? What if I want to do that? And I don't have any kids or anything like that." And he said, "Would you want to go do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to go do that." I had to relearn the lesson: you don't volunteer for anything in the Army, but I did. So I walked over and talked to the colonel for a little while, and he said, because I knew that the guy in the back, he was newly married, so he wouldn't want to go. So, and I asked him later, and he said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely glad you volunteered." So I did. That was a Monday. It was a Monday morning, and I remember going home from things were quiet in the world. We were in Somalia doing Operation Restore Hope, but I remember going home on Monday and going to my wife and saying, "Hey, I'm leaving for Africa on Friday." So I spent that week getting all my shots and turning my clothes from green to brown, and packing all my crap up. And I left that Friday for Somalia. I went there. So I went on my own. The 10th Mountain was in Somalia, but I wasn't going to work directly for them. It was still a United States operation, so it was still an American military commander. I think he was a Marine general, but he had a JTF, Joint Task Force, and the S3 was an Army infantry colonel named Colonel Baker. And he had a major that worked for him as the Joint Task Force engineer. His name was Major Peabody, John Peabody. John Peabody retired as a 2-star. He's in the construction industry. I should recommend him for your next one. And I was the first lieutenant. So I showed up, handed me some bullets at the Mogadishu airport, stuck me in the back of a truck. We drove up to the university facility. I got introduced to, Major Peabody. He had a couple captains. I was the only lieutenant. I was the first lieutenant. I had a couple captains, a couple E6s and E7s. That was kind of the America's JTF engineering staff, and so it was an interesting time to be there, and did some good things, did some really cool stuff. We did make a number of trips, very very deep, and almost up into Bardera and Baidoa, Somalia, which is where the hardest hit areas of the famine were, and our job was to load up a Humvee and go make sure the road was passable for tomorrow's convoy that was going to run relief supplies up there. Now that the military had opened the ports and all that was Civil War was all at all the choke points and so we kind of broke up the fight, and so we were starting to get some things in. I did a lot of work. I just learned a lot. We were working with a lot of civilian contractors, restoring water infrastructure and all that. So I would say my career in construction started a little bit before I got into construction. We were doing some pretty interesting things, and that was all. Most of that time was before things got a little out of hand there, and General Adid reared up and did some bad things. In fact, the Pakistani soldiers and turned into a witch hunt, or a manhunt, I guess is another. So this was in the, kind of in the early part of '93, kind of leading up into that. And but it was tremendous learning experience, and I flew back home and finished my job as XO. So.
Well, while in Somalia, what was like your, I guess, formal mission set? Like, what were you assigned to do there?
Yeah, Somalia, in every other job I had in the military, and I always tell every other job, it was real clear to me what I was there to do. And you're right, like if you know what the role of platoon leader is, the role of an XO is. Somalia was my first time and never in a staff type position, but I was willing to do anything. And so I was working for a very, very good officer in at the time, Major Peabody. Like I said, it's hard for me not to call him General Peabody, but he is But I would do whatever we want. You want me to throw some MREs in a box under the seat and jump in that Humvee and go 500 miles and satellite phone you that the road's good? I'm leaving in 5. So we kind of do whatever. There was a facility that we had rehabilitated some wells, because all the infrastructure in Mogadishu was gone from the Civil War, and so there was these wells. Well, then we had Brown and Root, who was the contractor at the time. We had them come in and put some well pumps back in, and then we turned it over to one of the clans where they would guard it, and then water becomes a commodity. The wells broke. Oh, me. I remember getting called in the middle of the night. I didn't want to go outside the wire and the gates in the middle of the night.
Right.
To go out and see if I could tell them. So I was just kind of do anything. I did a lot of reconnaissance. I remember writing a lot of recon reports. I don't think the Army was as big on PowerPoint back then as it is. What I've heard in the future years, was you went, you wrote stuff in a little notebook, spent 2-3 days, and then you came back and you got on a computer and you typed something up and said, this is what I did for the last 2 days. And it was an interesting time.
Is there anything like, I don't know, just in particular that comes to mind in terms of an impactful or just a memorable thing that you did?
With regard to Somalia?
Yeah.
Well, the story that the world knows is kind of see how badly it ended, because but I spent a fair amount of time outside of Mogadishu, and there was people pretty damn happy that we were there doing what we were doing. I don't write books. I'm not a political historian, whatever. But when the people have asked me over the years of what happened in Somalia, and I always say that when two people are having a fight and you go break up the fight, who is mad at you? And I get this kind of look like you're giving me right now, right? The answer to the question is the guy that was winning the fight is mad at you, because he was going to win the fight, but you broke up the fight before the fight was over, and that's my very, very high level. I mean, there's certainly a lot of other geopolitical levers you could pull there, but that's the way I always kind of looked at it: is why are they shooting at us and not those, not these other guys? And you realize it's because we messed up a good thing for them, So that was my take as a 25-year-old lieutenant that probably didn't know, a hill of beans of what's going on around me. But.
Yeah, no, I mean, the question was exactly as you put it, it was specific to your experience and your position there at the time. So, yeah, well said. And, my kind of takeaway, what I heard you say is, when you were going on, whether that was, your infrastructure rehabilitation or logistics rehabilitation, people that you encountered were happy to see you. And that's just cool to hear, regardless of whatever else happened externally from you, right? Awesome. So, we got to the point of it sounded like you finished up that deployment, headed back home. Let's continue from there.
Yeah, I headed back home, and not much else to report there. I went back and they didn't. Went back and slipped back into my executive officer role. My wife at the time was graduating college the following June. At West Point, you incur a 5-year active duty obligation. After the first Gulf War, there was a big thing about they wanted to reduce the Army to 535,000 people by 1995, which actually invoked some early out programs. So there was, as a West Pointer, I could have actually got out at 3 years. I didn't, but you just pick up a little more reserve commitment. But I thought about getting out early, but I didn't. I stayed. I finished as an XO. I had a really good colonel. I actually saw him at that reunion. He
Nice.
also retired as a General Bob Creer. And I remember going to talk to him about the fact that I was going to get out of the military. I thought, I was going to get out and put my paperwork in '94. And one of the questions I think that you kind of gave me like a little heads up on some of this chronology, but I thought about him when I was writing this because, good leaders allowed me the time to do the transition. He kind of made a deal with me. I was an XO. I was very experienced at taking a unit to NTC, being successful and coming back. And there was an NTC rotation, and it was like the end of the first quarter, early the second quarter in 1994. And he asked me if I would stay company XO, get the unit to and from, and then he said after I got him back from NTC, colonels back then had 60 days of permissive TDY they could give you. He said, I'll give you the whole 60 days. And I probably had a bunch of leave. So I came back from NTC as a first lieutenant, turned over my job, and I never went to another Army post. Because if I would have stayed in the Army, I would have had to go back to Fort Leonard Wood, advanced course, then I would have had to go do some years on a staff. I loved everything about being in the Army, but I didn't. I would have been quite a number of years before I would have been back to an opportunity to have a company command, and I didn't really want it. I wasn't excited about the path in the interim. So
sure.
So yeah, I made that deal with Colonel, went to NTC, got back, and I actually ended up double dipping. I had so much leave and permissive DUI. I was still in the military, but I had left and gone to work.
Yeah. So walk us through that process as you were just alluding to now. Kind of want to highlight this scenario of transition period, right? Discharging from the military, transitioning into civilian. Sounds like you might have immediately transitioned into professional, though. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's not in. So I guess a little known fact is it was a very short time in my life. Back then, there was a lot of recruiters that were real aggressive to people getting out of the military. There still are, right? And in particular, some that were focused on junior military officers, some that focused on various grades, and or people that come out of the enlisted ranks with certain technical skill, right? So I got hit pretty hard by a recruiter that sold me on the idea of going to a large company. It was a paper company. They had a program for future managers. They were looking for engineers, process improvement engineers and all that. And my wife at the time was still in college, and so I said, well, I'll go try this job. So I went and started this job, and I was like, it was in Pennsylvania. I was like 2 months into it, and I realized that no one here at this facility has ever heard about the program. It was kind of like my recruiter told me a lie type, Like no one has ever heard of this program. And within 2 months there, the person that was running the facility I was working at came to me and it's like, we've noticed that you're really good at leadership. Would you like to run supervise the shift work of the whole plant and on second shift or something like that? And I was just a new guy walking in there, and I was supposed to be this, corporate fed, process improvement engineer. So I was doing that for a little while, and I was like, okay, bad decision. Good thing I'm double dipping,
Yeah.
But I talked a little early about Dave. I remember it was Thanksgiving of that year, and our wives were really good friends, and so they're on the phone just talking ahead of Thanksgiving, and it's typically here, say hello to Dave. They hand you the phone, and so I was talking to him, and he said, how things going? I said, I hate this. I'm I got to figure out what to do next. And he's like, well, he had left the military about 2 years earlier, and he went to work for Granite Construction in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And he said, you should just come down here and interview. He said, it was really easy to come out of the military and go into construction. And he said, I'll talk to my boss, and this kind of becomes into the referral space. He said, would you be interested in it? And I'm like, yeah, I would. I can't see myself working as an engineer or supervisor in even as a mechanical engineer. I didn't want to be in a facility. I remember him and I had a conversation about how nice it would be to get out of boots and fatigues and go to work in boots and jeans. So this story I've told all my career is it was easy to come out of the military and go into construction because I did. I went from boots and fatigues to boots and jeans, and I was working with people and equipment, and all those things are just common between both, and different what the end product looks like, what you're trying to do, but it's a very, very, very easy transition. So, I jumped on a plane and went out, interviewed with Granite, and made plans to start with them at the beginning of '95, and went back to Pennsylvania, packed all my stuff up, and drove a U-Haul from Pennsylvania to Arizona, and I do that when I didn't have kids, started working for Granite and loved, and I've been in the, in the this particular industry since then. Mm-hmm. And that was good. There's the things, and I would suspect you're going to ask me something similar to, what advice you might have for somebody kind of going through, like all of a sudden I'm just a young project engineer at a construction company versus, being thought I was pretty cocky, first lieutenant in the Army, right? Sure. And so, there's a few pieces of advice I've given, and I've certainly hired, recruited, mentored, young guys coming out of the military into our business for 30 years. I wish I had done more, and I bet I've done 20, or I've got a lot of experience with these conversations. But one of the big takeaways that I would tell people is that you have to be willing to come out of the military and maybe start a little lower than you think your pay grade is, and just look at some people that have been around for a while and have some faith, because trust me, you will excel. And that's what I didn't really have that advice, but I started as a project engineer, and in construction, and project engineer might be 20, 21, 22-year-old college graduate just coming out of school becomes a project engineer. Well, here I was, 26, 27 years old, 4 or 5 years in the military, Venezuela. I had a lot of life experiences, but that's the starting job. And and all I can say is that that person coming out of college is going to be a project engineer for 2 or 3 years. Then they might move up, And I did one job as a project engineer, and the next job I was a project manager, and the next job it's right. Very much your military experience will get you there, but you got to be willing to maybe take off a couple stripes to walk in the door. That's one piece of advice I would share. And then the other one is it's kind of interesting. I think over my career, not as much anymore that I'm older, and I certainly don't come across as having been in the military. People know that I have, but is you have to be prepared to be a little stereotyped in some businesses, and just deal with it. People will look to go, oh, he came out of the Marine Corps, so he must be all regimented, or we all, as human beings, we all have biases, and some people's bias or stereotype, you just have to overcome it. And when they get to know you, like, oh, he'll just want to bark orders. Well, that's not really true, So, right. But other than that, what I was talking about earlier is very. I'm sure everyone you have on this thing talks about it, and so I don't need to. It's the transferable skills that are just, that will help you be that guy. If you're willing to get your foot in the door, you'll see how fast you can in the military, no matter what you did in the military, in small units to larger units or whatever, you worked with a team of people to develop solutions to very, 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 very complex problems. And that's what happens in business every day. That's what happens in construction every day. And being able to keep yourself from getting going crazy when something bad happens. You work the problem, right? That's what we did in the military, right? As a team, okay, this was our plan, but this changed, and so we work the problem. And whether it's construction business or really any business for that matter, it's just that being able to have the maturity to take a deep breath and work. What's the next solution? Not all is lost. So
absolutely. I mean, I consider that as being like a core principle, as I like to call it, that is translatable to, many situations, not even only professional, right? I mean, it's just also helps in life, so long as you're able to kind of recognize that core principle that were kind of, that was ingrained in you through military service, and how do you apply it? How do you adjust it, adapt to whatever scenario is happening now, personal or professional, in civilian life, and apply it accordingly. So I absolutely agree. And going back to the advice of, to your younger self per se, I totally agree with that in terms of, I like to make this comparison just to create, I don't know, more relativity or relatability, is if anyone were transitioning any field, right? If you were working, as a lawyer, and all of a sudden you're going to marketing, regardless of how many years experience, you're going to have to learn, anew in some capacity, in some way. And no different, coming from military. Even if you were a, engineer in the military, you're still transitioning, fields per se. So exactly to your point, have a little bit of patience, leverage the fact that, you have some really amazing experience, push that forward, and just watch yourself grow accordingly. Well, awesome. Well said. So we just hit, go ahead.
I would say that one other transferable, translatable skill that I don't think it's intuitive to people, but as someone that's I hired a lot of veterans, and I'm working with our veteran resource group here at the Walsh Group, is I don't think one skill that's very, very translatable is collaborative leadership. And I don't think military gets enough credit for that. I think that people who don't have military experience tend to think that, it's a fiefdom hierarchy, and the boss gives the orders and everybody just kind of follows it. And what I found in the military, particularly like when you're in a training environment, you get an opportunity, whether it be SAP school or basic training or whatever, where everybody's on equal foot, and then like you take turns who's the leader, and then everybody gets a chance to learn how to be the leader, and then people get to learn how to support the leader. People get to learn how to be the followers, and the next day you're the leader, and at the end of the day, just like in business, somebody has to be the boss, and you have to make the decision. And in the military, with the consequences, obviously they're lethal, or they can be lethal, kinetic, and whereas in business it's dollars and cents. And but I don't think the military gets enough credit. And I think people that come out, I think I find them, I see it in people that have worked for me, is they know how to sit around a sand table and make a plan with a team, and come up with a team. But then when the person in charge finally says, okay, this is what we're going to do, they also know how to say, okay, that's what we're going to do, and I support it.
Yeah, very, very well said. Yeah, thank you for adding that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So great addition. Thank you for saying that. And I absolutely agree with what you just said. The collaborative ability to work with a team, to lead a team, to flex within a team. Absolutely. So let's go through where you're at today in terms of business. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So we got myself to Granite. I'll take you through the next 30 years really quick. It's really it's almost a pretty simple construction. I worked for Granite in Arizona for about 5 years. I was a project engineer, project manager. I did a couple of years of estimating, learned the basic skills of construction, heavy civil. We did a lot of highway work. I started to do a lot of asphalt work there. 5 years later, have 2 kids, wife from Ohio, mom from Ohio, made a decision to move back to Ohio, where we wanted to raise our kids near a very big family. and moved back to, I went to work for a different construction company, very similar in scope. I found myself in their asphalt division. So I was area manager, regional manager. I became the assistant vice president. When the main guy retired, I became the vice president of the asphalt group for about a 1,000,000+ ton asphalt company all through the state of Ohio. Pretty big company. They're very well known nationally. And did that for a number of years. So I was in heavy civil construction. Asphalt gets a stigma, and I would say I get to be both because I was like real heavy civil construction on the front end, then asphalt in the middle, and then once my kids were kind of just about all out of the house, I had an opportunity to go back to the original construction company, which was Granite Construction. They were looking for someone with operational leadership experience to work with the mergers and acquisition team because they were in the business. They wanted to buy. They wanted to make 2 acquisitions, part of a big strategic plan that came out in 2015. They wanted to act in the water infrastructure space, and they wanted to buy another asphalt company in the eastern United States. I was the obvious guy to help with the asphalt on the eastern. So I worked in mergers and acquisitions for Grad. It was very interesting, different work. Nothing like I'd ever done before. Pretty cool. Did that for I thought that was going to take about 6 months. We would buy a company, and then I would get a chance to go run it. It took 2.5 years.
Right.
And we didn't buy an asphalt company. We bought a water company. So, 2018, Granite bought the Lane Christensen Company, which is also another publicly traded company. They were based in the Woodlands, Texas. And the CEO of Granite asked me if I would go run the operations there. So I moved to Texas in 2018. For about 2 years, I was the deputy running all the operations of Lane Christensen. We included a couple of other bolt-on businesses around the country to build a new operating group for Granite called the Water and Mineral Services Group. And for magnitude, about 56 offices nationwide, a couple in Canada, a couple in Mexico, some relationships in South America. Most, probably work in 45 of the 50 states, 2,400 employees. That was kind of the size of my group. And I did that for 2 years, and then I actually got asked to run the entire group. I was no longer the deputy. I was the president of Lane Christensen, all the different companies that we bought. I did that for a couple of years, and then it was amazing. And then I did that for the first year. I was running the whole operating group was 2020. Things got a little interesting in 2020. Travel became a little more challenging, and I had to travel a lot. But I still did it, and people all over the country work, and we had to keep everybody healthy and safe. So did that for a couple of years. So that was my departure from highway work, asphalt work. I kind of did the water space. I had businesses in pipeline rehabilitation, mineral exploration, drilling, water well drilling. It's funny because from fixing water pumps in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993, all of a sudden I'm back in the water well business.
That's what, right when you said that, that's what came to my mind. Yeah.
But Granite made a decision. Those businesses, when we bought them, weren't performing that great financially. A couple of them did some pretty tremendous things turnaround-wise. Strategic plans switched a different direction. Granite made the decision to sell those businesses, so I assisted with a little bit of that and ran the group until the end of a couple of years ago, and I made my exit, which was nice. Thought about retiring. Spent about 6 months just being retired and enjoying myself. Spent some time with my kids, did some traveling, and said I couldn't stand to be away from it. So I went to through connections. I got an opportunity to go meet the Walsh family, Dan and Matt Walsh, who own the Walsh Group and Archer Western Construction, and I met with those two and their sons, Danny and Sean, and the leadership of the transportation group at Walsh, and they offered me an opportunity to come to work for them. And I've worked for the United States Army and 3 really, really good companies. They always say you don't. It's not always about the company; it's about the people. I really very impressed with the engagement of the people that own this company. It's a very large privately held company, and the ownership is very involved, and it's just amazing to see. So I joined them coming up on 2 years ago now. After a little while, they asked me if I would run the West Coast for the transportation group. So I'm an Ohioan that's transplanted to Texas, and now I'm sitting here talking to you from Seattle. But we've got we've got some good clients and some struggles and some projects on the West Coast, but I'm working my way up and down the West Coast. We're trying to get the teams shored up, and so that's what I'm doing now. I'm senior vice president of the West Transportation Group for Walsh. I work for the COO. He's a great guy. He's a 38-year Walsh employee, and it's amazing. I want to pitch a little bit. I talked to you about I think it's about a year ago now. We have and it's really interesting for me because all three construction companies that I have worked for, not only are they're all very similar, but they've been partners in various joint ventures. My current company is in huge partnerships with the company that I was with for 15 years, and we've had so a lot of this I talk about in my history is because it all blends together because things aren't necessarily different from one to the other. Some of it's the ownership or the vibe and the energy, but the companies and this particular company had a group that's an employee resource group for women in construction and an employee research group for various things. And someone in our corporate office who's a Navy veteran reached out to me about a year ago and said, "Hey, we're thinking about forming an employee resource group for veterans, and call it VOW, Veterans of Walsh." And he wanted to know if I would be the executive sponsor of that activity. I said, absolutely. I was involved in both of the other companies in some effort very similar to that. And so we have a group that's called Veterans of Walsh. We established it. We do some publications and events. It's a little bit of a struggle. And so, I mean, if there's any veterans out there listening to this, I got to tell you, it's hard to, it's harder than you think to get veterans, number one, to self-identify. I know there's more veterans in our company than sign up for Veterans of Walsh or whatever, and that's not the first time I've seen that phenomenon. But our idea is that we have this group, and we can celebrate the milestones and the victories, and reflect on with Memorial Day coming up. I mean, everybody that I know, you were in the military. Everybody in the military has got got the name of at least one person they wear on their wrist, as I do, and to reflect the good and the bad. And what the other thing that I hope that the Veterans of Walsh does this is because we are. I'd like us to be advertising that we're veteran friendly because we are. I mean, there's people that I talked about it earlier. I don't care if you were a machinist in the Navy or a parajumper in the Air Force or whatever. You've got skills that can come into our industry, and you make a good living for yourself. And it's not always about that, but having that opportunity to be engaged and grow in a company it gets exciting. And almost any degree, whatever you did in the military, you learn some skills that will help you move into the engineering and construction sector of businesses, and I believe be successful. So
that's really awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, one step back, I want to just say congratulations on a really amazing career. I don't want to diminish you just blasting through a million different things and growing in terms of, responsibility and shifting different verticals within the industry. So really amazing career. And thank you for, brushing through that. That could be an episode in its own right, I'm sure. Now to what you just said in terms of Veterans of Walsh. I do agree with you in terms of sometimes it's hard to, have veterans self-identify or identify them. And that's a part of, I think, what I'm trying to build, what you're building, and just in terms of creating, positive notion around service, which I think will continue to carry, people forward in terms of being proud of their service. So that said, is the organization that you stood up, is it, it sounds like it is for both internal and external purposes, meaning like recruiting, but also internal kind of highlighting?
Yeah. What I've learned about employee veteran resource groups in multiple places is it takes constant few people. We've got a guy that's just very engaged in it, and he's making it work because it doesn't. unlike some other efforts that you might do that sometimes they get their own momentum and then they become self-driving.
Right.
I think particularly my experience has been a veterans resource group has to have someone that behind the scenes pushing along. We just happen to have a great guy doing it, and I give him all the props in the world. But I think it will be a long-term solid resource for this organization and our many employees. We just need to. It's in its infancy, so we
Sure.
we just kind of keep bringing along. He's done some really interesting things. They put together a digital flip book, and so anybody that signs up for the Veterans of Walsh, they get like a current picture, and then they have to send in a couple of a picture of you with your family, but the other one is so I sent a picture, like for example, my page. I sent a picture of me and my my sand fatigues in 1993, in the middle of nowhere. Picture of me and my kids, and then you're like your professional business picture, and then you just put a little description on there, and then you can go through and you can pull it up in the computer and you can look through. And every time we get someone new in the group, we ask them to put in the flip book. Dan Walsh, who's one of the primary, the generational owners, senior generation owners of Walsh, was in the Army Reserves, I believe, or the National Guard in the Vietnam era. So he's got a page in there. It's awesome. You see these young, like they're wearing the, just the green with the yellow U.S. Army on kind of thing. But he's so he's been super supportive of it as well. But
that's great.
Yeah, we're trying to highlight when and a lot of people, like in this the example of this, there's a lot of people that join, the spouse of a soldier or a sailor or Marine, right, and that works for the military.
That's great, and
a couple of years to see if we can get the hopefully it becomes a big snowball going down the hill.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I mean, no, I do agree with you. It's early stages, literally, right? It just in terms of when you establish this group and just the natural time it takes to exactly what you just said, right? Create that snowball effect, and I'm sure it'll continue to grow. So that's awesome that's been established. Happy to be able to plug that into the show as well. Closing out on the business side, I have two questions. One is, what was your favorite industry vertical, right? Out of all of these different elements, right? Asphalt, water, that you've done, what was your favorite out of all of them?
Ones that were profitable and safe.
That easy answer, huh?
Business industry can be, you people say, oh, it's a dangerous industry. It doesn't have to be. We ask ourselves every day, what are the hazards? What are we doing? What are the hazards? We need to try to do that every day. So I'm pretty excited about any type of work that no one gets hurt and that becomes profitable. I don't necessarily have a love for any one kind of work. Maybe in general, the contracting space.
Sure.
The challenge of getting a set of plans, building an estimate, bidding job, negotiating a contract, in general, doing a contract. I work for the number one bridge builder in the USA. I don't come from a bridge building background. I come from a contracting background. I've done a lot of asphalt work. I got handed the number one water well drilling business in the USA. I said, "Here, run this." I was one of my divisions when I was running lane. I'd never drilled a water well. I knew the concept, but what you figure out, and then the same with the pipelining business or mineral drilling business. What you figure out as you move through your careers, everybody comes up somewhere with some specific technical expertise. And what I've also learned in all of those businesses is there's always a lot more science to it than it looks. Water well drilling sure sounds pretty easy to me, but boy, when you start listening to the people that do that, you realize there's a lot of very, very smart people and the science and the things that I've done. And I found that in everything I've done. But at a certain point, when you start to get to the business level, it's less about do I know how to compact the asphalt or build the form system? And it's a lot more about, do I know how to hire and manage people with that technical expertise, and then do the jobs of safety culture management, talent management, financial management, risk management, client management, those types of things. And that's what I do. That's what my days are busy right now. I'm very busy with those types of things, and a lot of the client relationship conversations and reviewing bids for risk versus opportunities, and as opposed to can we form that wall at 8 square foot a man hour? Can we move that dirt at 300 cubic yards an hour, whatever so.
Sure.
But like I said, everybody in more senior levels of business have generally come up with, you have one or two of those things that you can maybe a little bit more of an expert on. Mine would probably be asphalt for the sheer number of years I've done that, or just general highway contracting. It's all good.
Yeah. I mean, great answer. I love how you brought in the kind of, I don't know, more macro business approach, as you mentioned, right? How do you create successful branches that will run kind of the day-to-day business elements? Really interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Last but not least, on the business side, and it could be something that you've already said, just want to give you the opportunity to plug in kind of a career win, whatever that means for you.
I mentioned to you that we're contractors, right? So, I was in the bid room. I'm waiting there's a bell outside my office, and I'm waiting for the bell to ring because we're bidding a job over today. The bell rings, I'll be doing a little cheer. But one of the things about contracting, particularly when public contracting, where you're submitting bids, is I've always said is you win some, you lose a lot. There's some, but you have to make the wins that you have count. If I career wins, it's been not quite done yet. I do see a finish line, but it's just been very I don't know, been very satisfying. Been able in the construction industry to raise 4 children in good homes, and at the end of the day, safe cars, and some they're getting their educations and things like that. So it's been good in that way. I've seen the particularly since 2015, going back to the nationwide platform company, it's given me an opportunity to see the great United States. And I say that from the perspective of last year, I decided to take a vacation. My girlfriend and I went to Hawaii because I needed to cross off the 50th state, say that I'd been to them all. And I wouldn't have, I'd probably be still 5 or 10 short if I hadn't been, going around the country and reviewing these businesses in different parts of the country. It's given me that opportunity. I think the biggest win for me is the relationships I've built. And some of it's related to that. I have a lot of I talk to you about. I have my best friends that I'll travel with in the fall, and we'll go to Army football games and go see the Army Navy game. And those guys have been my friends since we were 17, 18 years old. And Dave Richards and I were 22, young 20s lieutenants in the United States Army, and we're still friends. Dave's retired now. I'm a little jealous of him, but he gets to hunt and rope every day. But people I've worked with, I just feel like rarely does a problem come up that I certainly don't know the answer to everything, but I tell you what, I can pick the phone up and find out somebody that does in pretty short order. And some of that's just the value of those relationships, good and bad. You learn, you work with people that you never want to work with again, and you realize what to avoid, right? But for the most part, I just really feel like I've enjoyed a fairly long career of networking, with figuring out who are people that I want to continue to be part of my life, and who know that they can call me. Every now and then I'll get those calls, and I'll drop what I'm doing to help somebody, because I might call that guy back the next week. So so just relationships probably is the biggest one, and those relationships are from college, the Army, construction. Those are the ones that I'm not in this alone. And
that's an awesome answer. And what you just said there right at the end is really, I don't know, a critical thing for all of us to just hear and recognize that you're not here alone. You're not in it alone. You're not alone. That's important for veterans in particular to hear. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, last but not least, final segment of the show. Talk to us about your wellness practice. What does that mean for you?
Wellness practice is for me. For my mental health, I talk to my kids. My kids have, by hook or crook, have chosen to scatter to the four winds. They live in 4 different places. So a few years ago, it's my oldest daughter who graduated from medical school. She's in Philadelphia. And a few years ago, her and I put a practice together of Sundays where we're talking to Dad. Because I lived in a 5th state. I lived in a different state.
Right.
And so she's busy. I'm busy. And I travel almost weekly, which is not very good for your wellness sometimes. But so her and I put a practice together. We would have a Sunday phone call, and we started doing that. And what I loved about it was that it wasn't a forced, "How you doing, Dad? Good. How you doing? Good. All right, we'll talk to you next Sunday." I mean, we just started to have 30, 45-minute conversations. Sometimes we'll talk for an hour every Sunday. And then my son, who works for a bank in Ohio, not too far from where we raised him, he's doing amazing things. He's a computer program software developer for a big bank in Ohio, or he's on his second bank in Ohio doing that. But then he kind of said, "Hey, can I get in on that action?" And so I have 3 daughters and 1 boy, and just as a father, I'll tell you that 45 minutes with the daughter equals 20 minutes with the son. That's still a long talk with him.
Right.
Texts are shorter, conversations shorter, but I saw him and I started doing that. We throw a call in every Sunday, and then my middle daughter, 3rd child, the one that went to the Naval, she's in the Navy. We started doing it when she was stateside. Now she's in Japan. It's already tomorrow for her. She's plus 16 hours. So she's screwing up the whole Sundays are for talking to Dad thing. And
right.
but she just calls me when she can. And she spends a lot of time. She's on the USS Rafael Peralta. It's a guided missile destroyer. So she'll say, "Hey, we're leaving," and we won't hear from her for a few weeks, until they port up or go home or something like that. But so I talked to her, and then my youngest is the one that's still in college and in Arizona, and so she jumped on the Sunday train. So that's what I do for wellness.
That's amazing.
I try to, the construction industry can be very, very, very difficult on family, and and it can be big, with because the road under construction isn't necessarily always your street. So there's a lot of travel involved. There's time away from your family. It's been a lot of years that I'll reflect back on making good or bad choices about the time I spent at work versus the time I spent at home. But what's good for me and my wellness and mental health is the conversations I'm having with my kids, now and in the future. And I look forward to, someday I won't work, and then I'll really annoy him, and I'll go spend time with him instead of calling him every Sunday. From a other wellness perspective, I mean, I travel a bunch. Business travel is tough on the body.
Yeah.
So when I don't travel as much, I try to walk, try to lift. Not like I did when I was 25, and lean, mean sapper, but just enough to I like to be able to be active and not worn out.
Yeah. That's an awesome answer. And I always say walking is, I just feel like it's very underrated. Living in New York City for a long time, I was walking everywhere. And you really feel a difference in your day to day if you, just walk, just move a little bit.
Yeah.
And obviously love the family answer. That's really special. Congrats on that. So last but not least, final question, favorite book or books that you'd like to recommend to the audience?
Yeah, I saw that question was coming, and I had to think about it. I at times I have been, but I'm not much of a reader. If I do read something from a personal standpoint, some of my favorite books are. One of my favorite books I can still remember from college was Killer Angels. It's about the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's just very well written. One of my daughters is a big reader. She was reading To Kill a Mockingbird recently, and I thought, I don't know if I've ever read that, so I'm not so long that I read that. I like if I'm gonna do a personal read or a personal audiobook, I like some of the biographies. I did Eisenhower and did Hamilton, like the one that the play
Right.
and the musical's based off of. Get the audiobook or read the book. It's pretty phenomenal. And I think so. I think that's what interests me. I don't want to do that. On the topic of, but now to answer your question, so there's a book called Safety 24/7. It's a paperback.
Mm-hmm.
It's written by Anderson and Lorber. We used it at 2 companies ago to try to help re-energize our safety culture. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a book that probably over the years I've bought 400 or 500 copies of, and I've handed them out to people in business because it changed me. It seems a little bit of the way I thought. Not that I was wanting to hurt people, but maybe coming out of the military, I had that I'm bulletproof cavalier attitude around stuff. And it was a book that really kind of helped me reset my mentality for, our obligations as leaders and our obligations as human beings for safety in the workplace. I loved Extreme Ownership, Jocko's book. You probably heard that one from other people. Atomic Habits was good. It was written by Clear. And then there's another good one out there by a Navy guy. It's Abershoff, I think is his name. It's called It's Your Ship. And it's kind of extreme ownership, but on the Navy ship side. And that's just, so there's a few there. But I'm not sure I have a favorite book. But those are just some, maybe if you're building a reading list, I give you a few to work with. So for people.
Yeah, those last ones.
Atomic Habits is a good one for your personal life and your business life. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's a really good one that just talks about, like I can't just say I'm going to completely do something different tomorrow. It talks about taking the way you're actually going to get there is I'm going to take baby steps to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And, a little change every day goes a long while if you put some days together. So those would be my recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Extreme Ownership and Atomic Habits are 2 of like my, all-time kind of recommendations. And as you put it for Atomic Habits, what I like to say is it's kind of like the science behind how to create a habit in a very digestible way. So I agree with you. Those are awesome recommendations. And don't sell yourself short. I mean, you did it. Those are great recs.
Okay, very good.
Awesome. Well, Rob, thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
All right, Adam. Hey, appreciate it. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Thank you. To our listeners and subscribers, thank you for listening. A reminder to please subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. A quick shout out to our sponsor, Jet.Build, and we will see you all soon. Thank you. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.